Welcome to another episode of the Humble Marksman podcast. We're trying something different this time. I'm going to start recording this since I've got this fancy streaming cam and this light right here and this fancy microphone that you can't see, where I'll be using YouTube Live to stream these things. So if you want to jump on, interact, ask questions on the go forward, I'll be putting it on my main page, The Humble Marksman on YouTube, but all the streams will live on my Arrogant Marksman channel, my B channel here on YouTube. The next day, it takes about 12 hours or so when YouTube will post the video where I can download it. I'll rip the audio off and put it up on my podcast feed. So if you want the podcast as soon as it's available, then you have to join us here on YouTube for the live stream. Just a quick note, I would appreciate it if you decide you need some more USPSA gear. GhostHolsterDirect.com has a code GEARUP10, GEARUP10. Will save you 10% on your order. It's super solid gear. It's what I got started playing the game with. It holds up for years and years, and you can compete at the highest levels. Additionally, FTP Optics. If you need an open gun optic, FTP Optics Alpha 3 code HUMBLE22 will save you $15 on it. It's Phil out of Canada. They've just got some bad news on their gun policy in Canada, but he was an IPSC shooter, designed the Alpha 3 sight. The 8 MOA is awesome. It's what's on my match gun. So joining me this evening to respond to my comments about how USPSA could learn a thing or two from IDPA, I'm joined by Robert Wyatt from the Paracast. Robert, how are you this evening?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, doing just great, doing just great. And we have the USPSA presidential hopeful and constantly memed now on the internet, Yi-Min Lin. How are you, sir?
Good, Dave. Thanks for having us on tonight.
So Yi-Min, Robert, and myself are all in a group chat with, I don't know, probably 12 or 15 guys. And I made some bold claims based on a recent IDPA match I just shot it, I guess it was 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. It was the Texas State Open 2022. And first of all, guys, they'll listen to this, so I need to criticize the match. You got Walker's to be the title sponsor of the match. It was the Walker's Texas State IDPA Championship. There was a huge missed opportunity there for the Walker's Texas Ranger State IDPA.
I mean, let's be honest.
That's what it needs to be. If you get Walker's as your title sponsor, that's what it has to be. It doesn't matter what the match is called. If Walker's is the title sponsor, and it's in Texas.
That was pretty good.
Yeah, it's the Texas Ranger. That's the name of the match. But so they'll know for next year. But jumping in on this, so. Oh, no, that's the edit button. No, there we go. Putting my banners up. So USPSA could learn a lot from IDPA. And just to provide a little bit of background, I'll do myself, and then you guys can jump in because you guys have relevant backgrounds as well. But background, I have chartered an IDPA club. I have chartered a USPSA club. I've been a match director in both. I've done the indoor IDPA thing. I've done outdoor USPSA and indoor USPSA. So I've kind of run the whole gamut. I was also the co-match director of the North Texas Open in 2020. There was not a level 2 match in the DFW area, so me and a buddy decided there should be, and we made it happen. So I've got a good bit of experience hosting matches. I've designed a bunch of stages. Robert, I know you do a bunch of match directing as well. So what do you do?
Anymore I'm doing USPSA. I started out actually being assistant match director with IDPA. And that was a lot of fun. Then I kind of broke off from that, and I went and I started another club, a little indoor USPSA club that's done pretty well for itself. It's a tiny little thing, but people seem to enjoy it. But most of what I do anymore is all USPSA.
But your new shooter match, is that a USPSA rule set?
I use the USPSA rule set. It's actually really funny you mentioned that, because when we started that club, I was still involved with 2 different clubs, and I kind of put out feelers, and I'm like, what do you want? Like, we could do a USPSA club or we could do an IDPA club. And honestly, the people that responded said USPSA. I mean, I think I had one person say IDPA, and the rest, at the time, I think there was 15 people who responded, and they all said USPSA. And I'm like, well, a good match director gives the customer what they want, and that's exactly what we did.
This was for your match at the Armory?
That's the same one, yeah.
Okay.
And it's funny because, we'll get into it a little bit, but the IDPA club would have been a whole lot easier to run.
Oh gosh, yes.
I mean, it's so much easier to start out from the IDPA perspective than USPSA. But like I said, that's what people wanted. And so we went with it and made a lot of mistakes along the way. But ultimately, I think we have a good little club. It's fun.
And Yeeman, what's your experience besides flying all over creation, being a range officer?
So my experience is primarily with USPSA. I came to USPSA from the tactical defensive community after I left the Marine Corps. California being what it is, there wasn't as much of a demand for IDPA as there is for USPSA. We actually have 2 IDPA clubs in the Northern California region, one here at Richmond Rod and Gun Club, and then another which is actually quite significant, which is up in Sacramento, Sacramento Defensive Pistol Shooters. Yeah, so they're a huge club. So my experience is primarily from USPSA, participating, as staff, competitor, match director, RM, and just enough exposure to IDPA when we build our matches here to kind of see the flavor that they bring to the table.
Yeah, Sacramento, they've got a really good club, and they have some great people. I know a lot. I have a lot of good friends who I've met just through that club. There's such a good amount of people that shoot that IDPA match.
Yeah, it's really unique for that area. They used to do the Western Regionals up at Sacramento Valley Shooting Center. I mean, their club matches were 100 to 120 plus. So it was a really robust club when I first started.
Yeah. I drove down there one year to shoot the Western, and John Mercurio was the match director. Great guy. He put on a really good match. He worked hard to make that good.
Well, let's jump in, guys, because I've got a long list of topics to discuss. So I'm sure we're going to start some conversations. So I've shot a couple of matches. Let's see. I think I've shot 3 or 4 majors so far this year in USPSA and only 1 IDPA match. But I've shot, I don't know, probably 10 or more majors in IDPA previously. And I shoot, 5 to 7 majors in USPSA every year. But one thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently and using a USPSA match that does it very, very well as kind of a contrast is Dragon's Cup is often talked about by everybody as being like the ultimate in kind of shooter experience. The stages are excellent. The food they provide is great. They come around on snack carts and pass out snacks. They come to your bay and do like a little raffle at the bay, just handing out like door prizes, basically. The props are top notch. They've got shade on all the bays. Really good match staff, despite it being imported from everywhere. Like, as far as shooter experience is concerned, Dragon's Cup, far and away, even over nationals, provides the best shooter experience next to perhaps the Georgia State section, where they have staff reset, and North Carolina section also does that as well. And as a result, those matches have almost unrivaled shooters experience. But even the food you got to pay for. Georgia did a great job on match sponsorship, so they truly made it special, made it feel like a big event, and got you out of there in half a day. It's like if you've not shot a half-day match where you're shooting 10 stages in like 5 hours, it's really nice.
Yeah. That was probably one of the best matches that I have ever shot.
And that was last year.
That was last year's match, and all credit goes to them for putting on. It was a well-built match. It ran efficiently. The staff they were kind and they just, gosh dang it, they ran a great match. I'm so happy about them.
They take care of their staff in a way that a lot of matches don't. And I mean, even with the North Texas Open, I did not have the sponsor because there were just the 2 of us who were putting it together. I didn't have the sponsorship support to be able to really lavish the shooters and ROs with gifts. We still paid a per diem. I can't remember exactly what the package was at Dragons, but I heard it was like they comped your hotel room and then paid you $75 a day per diem, which is, I mean, that makes standing in the hot Texas sun bearable almost. Was that right? Was that what the package was? Yee?
The hotel I definitely knew about. Billy Dotson was the match director. We had some discussions about that prior to the match going on, and he knew that he needed to bring in ROs from around the country to be able to support a level 3 USPSA match. So he really went out of his way, along with Charlie and T. Gallen, doing the food side to make sure that the staff were made to feel as welcome as possible, especially if we're traveling all the way out to Midland, Odessa.
Yeah, because I mean, that's a club that gets routinely 30 shooters a month, and they put on a level 3 match completely with import staff. Yes. The Laser Ninja Dragon League gets between 20 to 30 people at their monthly match.
Yeah.
But diving in here because I'm going to build
well
up.
done. I mean,
yeah,
sincerely,
it's impressive.
well done. That is awesome.
Yeah, it truly is. So kind of jumping right in there. IDPA has a lot of stage designs. You can't run more than a certain distance. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. I'm an expired safety officer in IDPA, but I want to believe it's like 10 or 20, maybe 30 yards. There's a set number of foot travel that you can't exceed. The shooting is very prescriptive as far as how far away the targets can be, which is why the shooting is very straightforward. And all the stages max out at 18 rounds. And you have to use these crazy engagement sequences and stuff like that. And as a result, like, there's not a lot you can do. Like, it's kind of, it limits your options as a match director when you're coming up with it. And the opposite of that being USPSA, where you can do basically anything you can imagine. But it's interesting because if you think about the creativity that you encounter at a typical level 2, 3, 4 IDPA match versus a level 2, 3, 4 USPSA match, I mean, at Nationals last year in USPSA, did you see anything that you wouldn't see on the ground at your club match?
I'm trying to think. I mean, most.
The answer to me was no.
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 I'm going through it, and it was all pretty vanilla. Is that mean to say? I shouldn't say that, but it was kind of vanilla. It's
straightforward. I mean, they're trying to not get extreme, but at the same time, here's an example of what we encountered at this match. It was a speed shoot stage where you were seated in a little duck blind. They had a popper behind a target, and it was best 4 shots per paper. They had a popper behind a target in front of you that you had to engage first. So with 4 shots, you darn sure were going to hit the popper behind it. It was a large popper. It would fall, and it would trigger a trolley that had the same priority as a mini popper going down this sled, and it was a disappearing target unless you hit the mini popper at the bottom of the ramp. If you hit the mini popper at the bottom of the ramp, it would throw another switch that stopped the trolley right in front of it, disappearing behind cover. So you could do the high-risk thing of shoot the first target, track the target down the trolley, finish on the popper, then finish on the paper target behind it.
That's cool.
Had to do. Or you shoot that target. It was probably a 75-degree seated wide transition onto a mini popper at about 15 yards. It wasn't a super easy shot with a dot, but it was close enough to where you had to go for it. But I mean, to give you an idea of the difficulty, I'm a master level shooter in USPSA, master in IDPA now, and I was able to engage the first target, 0 down, swing on to the mini popper, over transition slightly, threw a duft, called it, and then hit that and still put 2 tracked shots onto the thing. So the difficulty was tuned up properly to where, I mean, the skill level of the average IDPA shooter is generally going to be a little bit lower because the skill to compete is not as high as it is in USPSA. There aren't any shots in an IDPA match that nobody can make usually.
Well, that and you also have to consider that the amount of rounds necessarily is going to limit the attrition rate that it takes to become good. If you're shooting 18 rounds in a stage versus 32 in USPSA, you're just naturally going to get better a little bit quicker. And I don't say that as a negative. I think it's just a fact.
And to kind of underscore that point about creativity, but I mean, Robert, you've shot enough IDPA majors where there always is something memorable at a major match that you've never seen before, and it's fun. Like, it's cool. It's still competitive. Sometimes it's dumb, but usually they hit the formula correctly and it's creative. But it takes a lot at a USPSA match to create a stage that everybody thinks is amazing and wants to copy.
We had this discussion on the Paracast once, and it's interesting to me because you're completely correct. Parma up in Idaho, they always put on some of the best matches in IDPA, and we still talk about them to this day. And in USPSA, if you want to have a discussion about matches that people are still talking about, you'd inevitably
it's area 3.
Always exactly.
That's all it is.
And people are like, oh, well, Area 3 has these goofy things, and it's like, yeah, but those were really fun. I mean, they're these goofy things, and don't get me wrong, USPSA members, they like to complain about everything under the sun this way and that. That's just the way they are. If they're not complaining, they're generally not happy. But one of the greatest things about IDPA is like my favorite match I ever shot, whether it's USPSA or IDPA, was actually up in Parma, and the entire match was themed around cars. So you were shooting, driving in a golf cart, you were shooting around in cars, out of cars, around cars, over cars. It was fantastic. The match directors took a lot of time, and they built these wonderful stages all around this theme. And it's funny, it's like it's kind of that 1984, our weakness is our strength kind of thing, but it really is true. The fact that you only have so many rounds that you can deal with, it forces you to think of creative ways to essentially solve the problem. And in many ways, IDPA is actually superior to USPSA because they can kind of force you to do things where you can sort of force them in USPSA, but it gets a lot harder to do.
It's a good point. The closest, like for instance, disappearing targets in IDPA, it forces you to engage a target that disappears, where a lot of times in USPSA, if it's too difficult to target, you just ignore it.
Yeah.
And there's no penalty mics. I think, is it area 3 that does it, where they put a box where you can see the target at rest, but you got to run like 15 yards to get to it? That's
sure.
a creative workaround.
God bless that man. I mean, he is.
That's the way to do it.
That's pretty clever. Yeah. I mean, it's really a clever, it's kind of, some people are like, well, that's a dick move. Well, no, it's not. We're going to present a series of challenges and we're going to let you solve them. And if you think that this target is too hard, fine. You can bail out and haul over to this little bailout box and shoot it from there. But good luck, go with God. And there you go.
So that was one thing that I noticed, and it kind of builds off of that. Is so this Texas Walker's Texas Ranger State IDPA Championship. I'm renamed it now. Adam and Bora. That's what it's called now. But
this is like Langdon's rodeo.
Yeah, that's right.
Forever be a rodeo.
That's what it is for now. And well, what they do is, because the stages are constrained to being 18 rounds or less, you're limited on the amount of distance you can put on the shots, the number of steel targets that you use. You're naturally creating stages that reset faster and score faster. You're not using the entire bay because the sport is optimized to be able to be played at any range. Whereas USPSA stages, you guys have drawn plenty of them. How much of the bay do you use when you build a USPSA stage?
It depends entirely how much I hate the people who are old and can't run.
Oh, pretty much all of it, though. Like if the shooting area isn't, if the shooting area is not gigantic, the targets are really far away. It's like, well, the bay is 30 yards wide, so I'm going to put a narrow shooting area, and the targets are going to be, it's 12 to 15 yards on either side of the shooting area. So the reset ended up like everybody. What I should do is I should look at my watch and see how many steps I took yesterday, because at Dragon's Cup, I walked 8 miles, and they have a lot of big bays there. And I would be surprised if I walked 4 at the IDPA match, and it was 13 stages. To that point, though, they also have a very abbreviated make ready time. And by the rule book, the current rule book, I'm not sure what the new one says. The current rule book, you get 15 seconds upon make ready. And if you say you're not ready at the end of 15 seconds, you get 15 more before you incur a penalty.
Is it obvious that I'm looking at Min right now?
Well, on my screen, he's on that side of you, but
okay. Just pretend that I'm looking directly at Min.
But I'm not throwing barbs at Min, but I mean, Min
I am.
I am. He has a long make ready, but at the same time, in a major match, you get one competitor on a squad who, like, let's say it's a 2-minute make ready, and the average shooter's make ready is 30 seconds. And I've done enough of my own match videos to know my make ready takes between 30 to 40 seconds, depending on how much fidgeting I have to do with my cameras. And I mean, that's a minute and a half extra time over that 30-second mark. So on a 12 or 13 stage day where you're shooting all in one day, like a single shooter with a long make ready can extend that day by 15 minutes for everyone, including the squads behind them that they ultimately back up on the squad. And
absolutely,
if pro sports have taught us anything, I just learned this about Formula One at the race at Monaco this past weekend. After the formation lap, a clock starts, and they've got 3 hours to complete the race. If they can't get through all the laps in the race, then the race counts down, and then they have one extra racing lap, and then whoever wins that lap wins the race.
Interesting.
Baseball has done a similar program. Golf is trying to make the sport speed up. Like IDPA matches, I've shot our local club one, outdoor one, only a couple times. They'll get 6 or 7 stages in, and it takes like 2.5 to 3 hours. That same IDPA club, or the same USPSA club at that gun range that I used to be the match director for, we would do 6 stages, and it would run from like 10 a.m. until like 3 p.m. like almost every time. We would have twice as many shooters at the match, which is part of the problem. But at the same time, the amount of time it takes to reset the stage and score it and let the shooter shoot was significantly more. So to that point, yesterday or 2 days ago at the Texas Ranger, it was a 8:30 hammers down. We were done at 3:30 and we shot 13 stages with a squad of 12.
No break for lunch?
No break for lunch.
Oh, wow.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
I despise breaking for lunch. I know people do it, but although having said that, again, that Parma match that we shot up in Idaho, they always got like all the women, like the wives of the match directors and stuff. They would give you this. It was like this big giant pot roast lunch. So you got like big chunks of meat, gravy, mashed potatoes, corn on the cob. And the first time I ever went and shot a major match, I'm like, this is awesome. And then I learned you don't eat the lunch. It's a miserable experience if you try this. But
yeah, for sure.
No, it's funny. I grew up, I started in IDPA, and so my make ready was always about, it's kind of like, you come up to the line and you're ready, and they say load and make ready. You put the magazine in, rack it, put it back in the holster, and you're off to the races. And by and large in USPSA, that hasn't changed. I do all my make ready before I actually approach the line, so that, I mean, sometimes I think we all get there where you have some of those memory stages where you're like, okay, one last deep breath, make sure I got it. Yeah, this, that. Okay. All right. Now we're going to go. But I'm all in favor of driving that make ready down to like 30 seconds.
Yeah. And I think IDPA, because I was early on one of the early stages and I duffed it because I didn't have, like, they gave us because of where we were in the match, this particular area, the stages were simple, but I was the second shooter, and it was they gave us a warm-up stage, and then it was the stage immediately following it. I was the first shooter. And so as a result, I ended up duffing. Like I had hesitation in my transition because I didn't have time to get really burnt. Like I got 2 walkthroughs in the 2 minutes done, and I got like 2 rehearsals mentally before like I had to get in the box and go. And so that's maybe not enough time. I wouldn't have hurt my feelings if they'd given us an extra minute on the walkthrough portion of the stage to get ready to shoot, but that would probably be my biggest criticism of that.
Yeah, and I mean that is kind of the one thing though about IDPA is the stages tend to be very linear, and the amount of options essentially in the stage don't really present themselves all that often, and so pretty much there's one way to run it, and once you have it, generally you're just like, okay, make sure that I hit my marks, and you're off to the races. USPSA does tend to present those options, which is one of the things that makes USPSA really, really good. And so you're able to, it's what I always teach people in my new shooter class. We present you with a series of problems and allow you to solve them.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, so Dave, you mentioned something about a warm-up stage. So I've heard that concept in IDPA a couple times. That's really a thing.
It is really a thing. I don't love it, but at the same time, I don't hate it either. The warm-up stage that we had was like in IDPA, the targets are not impenetrable, so bullet pass-through is a thing. So they set up a shoot target, and then kind of off to the left of it was a no-shoot target, and then off to the left of that was a, they're linear. So there was another one. It was 6 on the first target, 6 on the second target, but it feels like a pistol drill where I tried to reload and transition between the targets, but you can't do that. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're loaded to division capacity. So it was a 12-shot stage that I ended up like breaking my grip and having to rebuild it before doing my standing reload. So I cost myself a better part of 2 seconds screwing that up. That's just an example of not having enough time to get ready to shoot. But I mean, at the same time, it's time plus, so it doesn't really hurt that bad when you have that kind of hiccup. But I mean, it is just letting people get their jitters out and make sure their equipment works without, but I mean, a 12-point stage is still very valuable, but the raw time on that stage for the fast guys was like 6 seconds. Just because, and you think about it, USPSA cadence, and if you're shot calling and you don't mind dropping a Charlie, everyone's petrified of dropping points in IDPA because each one is worth a second.
Oh, they certainly punish you on the penalty phase.
If they went back to a half second per down, then I think that they'd really be able to gobble some market share. But another thing that they did at the match, and I'm actually supportive of seeing how the shooters respond to it. Is what IDPA does is they make people feel like they're good at shooting through what they do, and like the way to get awards in Carry Optics Sharpshooter, it went out to 5th place because there were over like 25 people. So basically, 1 in 5 effectively get a trophy, which immediately the criticism is going to be don't give everybody a trophy. But as we'll get into here later on, I think it does help with retention, the fact that they're doing this. And then there's
Guaranteed
a prize table. Oh, yeah. And then there's a prize table that is done by raffle. And so anybody, doesn't matter how you have a chance of winning a gun. They gave away 8 guns at the Texas Ranger, and it was it's a Texas State IDPA match for those just joining us. But Walker's,
I thought it was a TV show.
Yeah, that's all. Chuck Norris was there to hand out prizes. But 8 people walked away with guns who would likely never win a gun in USPSA. Like, it's tough to win a gun in USPSA. Very few people do it. And so they make these people feel like winners because they are getting a prize off the prize table. Because, I mean, I've been like, I won a Rudy Project set of glasses off an IDPA prize table. I won a Glock cert. So to be able to, I won this in a match, it just makes you feel cool when you tell your shooting buddies that you got this thing in a match, like there's some kind of ROI for doing it, even though there's not.
If I could speak from the standpoint of a sponsor, because I've been that occasionally, I happen to like IDPA's way of doing it. What you see happen in a lot of situations is the same people are taking the same guns off the table, and all the other stuff is left over to all the other shooters way down the line. But when you're trying to get your name out there and you're trying to get a product out there, the people who are generally down the line are the ones who are more likely going to try your product. If you have a guy who's like top end, he's not going to buy your bullets. He's used to what he has, and he has no reason to even try anything new. But if you have a random draw, it's going to get your product into the hands of a person who potentially is more inclined to try a new product. And there's a certain value from an advertising standpoint that way.
It's almost like you read my mind.
Well, I think the trend that I've seen working major matches is that's typically what you're actually going to see. I mean, I know Ken Nelson did sort of that random prize drawing at Area 1 when he did it at St. George a few times. Dragons Cup did a random prize draw. I think the only place that I've seen where it's still traditionally order finish is generally at Nationals, USPSA Nationals, and I think Area 2 still.
Area 4 does it too. Okay. They have a prize table you walk based on finish.
Right. But I think the way that Area 4 has done the prize table finish, it's done in such a way where, even if you are 50th or whatever, you're still coming about with something of value. And it's not just, oh, hey, here's.
I can't remember what my position was last year in Open. It wasn't particularly remarkable. And I came away with an MBX mag and like a pound of like major pistol or something like that. It was a prize that was cool. Like, I've never gotten something off the prize table at Area 4 that I wasn't like, this is something useful that I need. They do a good job at the Area 4 prize table, but at the same time,
yeah, Chad was. I guess he's not going to be the air director anymore, but Chad was always really good about giving people a lot of value on the prize table. But what made Chad such a great match director as far as the sponsorship goes was he always made you as a sponsor feel like you were valuable to him. It was never this form letter kind of feeling of like, hey, we're USPSA and you should just give us some stuff because we're USPSA. By the way, did I mention that we're USPSA? You never got that feeling from him. And there was a point where we're like, okay, who are we going to sponsor? And we had this conversation. It's like, we will always send stuff to Chad, like guaranteed, no matter what he does. If he asks, we will send stuff to him.
Yeah. And they did a really good job. So the next point for those listening, not watching the chat, I'll put the banner up. So the IDPA matches, and this is true of the Walkers Texas State this year, but it's been every IDPA match I've ever attended. They do a really good job attracting more vendors to the majors. At a state level match, I think they had 5 vendor tents, which usually you get 2 to 3. At Dragons Cup, I think there were 4. and there were 300 and something competitors at 340 competitors at Dragons Cup. And at this IDPA match, there were like 202, maybe, like because it's a 1-day match. They can't turn as many shooters. So they have a staff day shoot, and then they have the main match, and that's it. So
basically what you're saying is the next USPSA president should probably be taking notes on how Dragon Cup runs their match in terms of creating good matches that people want to attend.
They on the USPSA side of the house, I think they've come closest to the mark for me on what a quality match is. I think Area 4 last year was probably my favorite match I shot all year.
Yeah, that was a good match.
That was a really good match. The only big criticism there was they didn't get the food right, and we'll get into that here in a short amount of time here.
Are you the kind of person that actually wants to eat while you're at the match?
It depends.
It seems there's two camps, right?
It depends how slow we're going. If we're shooting a stage every hour and 10 minutes, then sure, let's stop for lunch. But if we're shooting a stage every 30 to 45 minutes, let's keep going.
Okay, just curious.
It very much has to do with the pace of the match. If we've got momentum and I'm not getting stiff in between shooters, just waiting an eternity to shoot, then let's keep going. But if it's really slow, then why the hell not just stop and have a bite?
So there's a question I have here. So when we're talking about all these things that IDPA does, with USPSA, you can take a look at the major max schedule, and every year it seems like there's somewhere between 40 to 50 major matches a year if you count your level 2s, your sectional state matches, area matches, and nationals. How many major matches are there usually within IDPA?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. There's at least as many, I think.
Yeah, I think IDPA went through a little bit of dieback when they went and changed their rule set, but then when they changed it back, I think you're actually seeing a big renewed interest from people.
I think you're going to see a lot more with the rule book changes. We'll get into that here in shortly as well. But I mean, the changes that IDPA did to their rule book, USPSA could take notes from, because they gave the shooters what they want. And I got the skinny. We'll get into it later. This is what we call a hook in the business. I know why carry optics was not 15 rounds now, because I had a conversation with somebody who was involved with the alpha set of the rules, and he was the one who called it back, not Wilson Combat like I suggested. So
that was going to be my first suspicion.
No, that's not what it was. Originally, it was drafted at 15 rounds in CO and ESP2, but I'll tell you why it's not in a moment.
Well, now I want to find out.
I know. You're going to have to stick around to the end, buddy.
I guess I better stay on the show.
I know, you better. So another thing, as far as match support, is IDPA seems to do a much better job of fostering a community and creating a sense of involvement. When I was designing this is anecdotal, but when I was designing IDPA matches, this is an indoor match, we had 2 bays, and I had 5 helpers per bay to build the stages.
Wow.
At my outdoor USPSA match, I was lucky if I had 2 to 3 to help build the stages. And it takes a lot more effort to build a USPSA stage than it does an IDPA stage. A lot more.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with you. I think a lot of it really comes down to the culture. And I mean, if your club has a culture of everybody helps, everybody works, everybody helps, then I think you're going to see a lot more folks. But you are certainly right in the sense that USPSA stages are much harder to build.
So here's something. I've got 2 cards I'm going to put on the screen. IDPA does a better job creating a family-friendly environment. I see significantly more children at IDPA matches just hanging out with their parents than I do at USPSA.
Which is funny because IDPA has an age restriction.
Exactly. And also, there's more overtly Christian shooters. And this is true in the DFW area. This was true in the matches in Alabama and Georgia and all throughout the South that I shot. Just walking around at the match, people wearing like obviously Christian T-shirts.
Really?
The number is significantly higher at an IDPA match than a USPSA match. And this is just me asking a question.
That would explain why there was that prayer tent that I thought was a vendor area. So that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, and
Wait,
also...
This was at Parma?
No, I'm just joking.
But to that point, most of the IDPA majors I have attended have started with a prayer.
No kidding.
And I'm not making this as being prescriptive. I'm just speaking to the culture of the people who are running these events and showing up to help at these events. So if those are the people who are in charge, it probably resonates with people who show up to the event, and immediately it kind of creates a sense of tribe where they want to show up. And to that point, where is it? See, I mean, they try to find more volunteers. In this particular match, there were like basically 4 volunteers per stage at a major, which is pretty good. It's a pretty good turnout for that. And there were volunteers to serve meals, because the typical USPSA thing is a food truck pulls up and then there's a line that's long. 20 people get to eat off the food truck, and everybody else abandons it and either goes hungry and complains or just skips the meal entirely. I mean, that's been the biggest snafu, and Area 4 was guilty of this last year as well. It's like the difference is the wives of all the guys running the matches showed up and plated all the food that came from the caterers. So you just walked up and picked up a plate of food and sat down and ate it. Like, it was all done for you. It took like a second to step up to the table, get your food, and step away. They put the drink somewhere else so you wouldn't linger. And it was brilliant. Everybody got to eat. People who wanted seconds were able to get seconds. They ordered enough for it. And I think you're seeing longer term volunteers. Like, just anecdotally, the people who are running these IDPA clubs tend to run them for 5-10 years or more. And whereas USPSA match directors, and I'm proof of this as well, I made it about 2 years before burnout was to the point where it's just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And like, I'll somebody else take a turn. And everybody kind of treats it that way, as like, I've got to do it so we can have a match, but I don't want to do it. I want to shoot. And
oh, look at that. Little Matty Hopkins. Such a nice comment.
Oh yeah, what's he saying?
Matt doesn't like music. He's a hater.
Matt,
Sorry.
if you're going to troll, you can do better than that. I've met you in person. You're a clever dude. It's not your best work, my man.
Do you know what? Actually, so I've thought about this a lot, and there seems to be a common theme and thought among a lot of people about, should we give awards out? And there is there's the one side of the camp that's like, if you're not first, you're last. And I get that, right? This is a competition. We should only reward the best and brightest people in the world. There's the other side of the camp that's like, that kind of, they've been match directors and they've worked these matches for a long time, and they've seen people come and go. And USPSA has about an 18 to 24 month turnaround. IDPA has about an 18-month turnaround. So people coming in and leaving the sport, it never stops. It just doesn't. But the thing that I have noticed is, when you get a brand new person, if you make them feel like they're a part of the club and they find a way to get some kind of recognition for their efforts, in a lot of cases in IDPA, it's that 3rd place marksman trophy. I know, because I got that 3rd place marksman trophy, and I never really won anything in my entire life. But I have noticed through all the time I've been in IDPA and USPSA, it doesn't matter the sport. If you get somebody that recognition that, hey, you worked hard and you're something, here's this D-class trophy. And like, the higher up guys, they're like, yeah, we don't care about that. It's a D-class trophy. Those guys still suck. But to them, that's the world. And I promise you, those guys who won those little D-class, C-class, B-class trophies, they stick around. They stick around for a long dang time. And in a lot of cases, IDPA does that really well, where they recognize success even at the lower levels. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for USPSA to come in and say, we want to recognize and honor these people who they will never be as cool as Matt Hopkins. They'll never be like Dave Bland, but they're going to do well in their own little world. And for them, that's everything. And if we can kind of nurture those people and keep them in the game longer, that builds our culture. And it builds it in a way that you can never do almost in any other way.
I mean, there has been some discussion about that sort of volunteer recognition. Anecdotally, what you talk about, Dave, with sort of a more Christian focus, more family friendly, that sort of pulls on the volunteer heartstrings in a way that certainly at my club here at USPSA Women, we've done that to basically make people feel welcome. But it's not necessarily under a religious volunteer type perspective. It's like you go take your kids to soccer or basketball or anything like that. I mean, that is sort of the expectation up front. Like, you're going to volunteer, you're going to bring drinks, you're going to bring this, you're going to do all this. And so it's very upfront that there's a certain amount of volunteer that has to take place. Certainly with USPSA, it's there, but it is, it is interesting. It's very regionally specific, right? So if you take a look at where we're at, Robert's from the Salt Lake City area, Mormon culture is very strong there. You're out in Dallas, Fort Worth in the South. I'm from, California. So you have very different regional and different approaches to how you foster volunteerism. I mean, I can't say that I've seen anything on IDPA that is sort of a national push on their end to say, hey, this is kind of what you can expect when you go to an IDPA match as far as volunteerism is concerned.
No, but Matt brings up a point. Like trophies and what do you say? Trophies and progression keep people active, just like a belt system in martial arts. It's really true.
Yeah.
I just think the best way to keep people in our game longer, and it's not to say we have to give a recognition trophy for every single thing in the world, but at the same time, recognize when people do something good. And I've seen even at our local SLPSA club, I have seen them honor people who are like last year, Dirk Hopkins came out and he worked his butt off all week setting up the Utah State, and they recognize that, and that kind of stuff matters to people. And in USPSA and even in IDPA, the harder you work as a match director and as anything in your club to build that culture, so that it basically, and IDPA actually does this better, in my opinion, than USPSA, where it has this culture of we're all a team. What do you say? It's kind of the tribe, right, Dave? Where we're all doing this together, and we're going to get together. We're going to shoot this match. We're going to have our awards after. We're going to hang out together. Hey, a bunch of us are going down. We're going to go to the In-N-Out or whatever. We're going to get some food. And we all will kind of just work together as a group. USPSA, in many aspects, and it's not always this way, and I don't want to be absolute, but USPSA in many aspects, it doesn't have that. It almost has this 3-gun culture of, okay, well, you jerks go set the match up for me, and then I'll show up like 5 minutes before the match starts, and I'll shoot the stage, and I'm going to complain about it.
USPSA culture is performance-based because it is the sport that is kind of the deepest end of what practical shooting is, which is cool, but at the same time, it's not professional. So it requires volunteers, but if everybody has that killer instinct professional sort of mindset, it makes it really difficult to foster a sense of community. And I fielded this comment from, I'm trying to put an actual number on it, not just make one up. 4 or 5 people in the past year have made the comment to me that they like shooting USPSA better, but they enjoy IDPA matches more because of the people. There's a greater sense of camaraderie because, I mean, I get upset at USPSA matches if I can't shoot with people who take it as seriously as I do. If they put me in with a bunch of, random people who aren't taking the sport as seriously or, can't digest stages at the same level, the deeper end of the pool can, it's not as fun to me because I'm trying to do the best I absolutely can. And like, ultimately your friends end up being roughly on the same level of skill or higher than where you're at in the sport. Whereas IDPA seems to create this like cross skill level spanning community where everybody goes out and gets lunch after the match, right? Because one, the match only takes 2.5 hours to shoot, so you can go make it to a meal. Like, there's enough time between meals to set up a match, shoot it, tear it down, and then still catch a bite to eat. The USPSA matches take so long to break down and shoot because everybody's make ready routines that, I mean,
I don't know what you're talking about.
Like 6 or 7 we could have ordered a pizza by now. In fact, we did order a pizza, and it's here. Would you like some while you're making ready?
But I understand why people are saying that, and I've experienced it as well, because like when I moved to a new area and came into Dallas, it took me 6 to 8 months of shooting matches to actually start to develop, friends. Whereas the IDPA folks, when I would show up and shoot matches randomly, people I didn't know, were very quick to kind of like take you in and, oh, you're pretty good. What's up, man? It was a much friendlier environment. And
I can totally echo that. When I first got into shooting, I was lucky because I showed up. I knew nobody. I took this. It was a how to be safe and proficient with a handgun. The instructor said, "You seem to like this. Go shoot this IDPA thing." I had no clue what it was. I just looked it up, and there was this place, and so I showed up. And I'm like, I'm here to shoot this. I know nothing about this. And you're like, no worries. What kind of gun do you have? I have this kind of gun. Cool. We're going to put you in this squad with this guy named Steve Koski. And he basically comes up, puts his arm around you and says, you know, come on, buddy, we're going to go figure this out. And he basically just kind of shepherded you through the whole thing. And at the end, he's like, look, did you have fun? Yeah, cool. Do you want to come to this other match that we have next week? I will come to that. And you very quickly get kind of encompassed in this, for lack of a better word, this group hug of people who just want to all be together and shoot these fun matches. USPSA, I have noticed, and this is even true at our local clubs, there's a lot of folks who are on the higher end of proficiency, and they do not want to invest their time with a person if they think that person's not going to be serious about it, which is hard, because what it ends up doing is it creates this super squad effect at the local level of, here's all the top end guys, and then all of you new guys just go F off. And that's not cool, because then the new guys don't ever get to have that experience. And so I've been in both of those worlds where I'm sitting there and I'm like, I want to go shoot with the best at the match. But at the same time, I'm like, all these people who come to my new shooter squad, they're looking for somebody to give them guidance, to help them through the stages and make these things. And if you don't have a culture in your club that basically just demands that of you, it is really, really hard to keep people coming back to these games and even sticking around long enough to get those silly little trophies, just to want to actually stick around long. IDPA is actually really good that way.
I mean, one of the things that we talked about before, Robert, is, I mean, your match at the Armory, that is kind of like an intro match. You know, USPSA, you definitely see that, not really a segregation, but that separation with the people that are trying to be consistently competitive and then the people that are coming in. You know, my experience coming into USPSA was very similar to yours, where it was a club that was a smaller club. It was more of a social club than a competitive club. And it's kind of that entryway into the bigger USPSA world, where you can kind of learn the rules. Somebody can kind of mentor you as you go along. And then at some point they say, hey, you've kind of gotten to the point where, you know, maybe you should go check out, you know, this bigger club. I mean, I think it's very similar to what you deal with at the Armory, where guys shoot a little bit and then you say, hey, why don't you go check out, you know, Salt Lake or whatever. And then they kind of see, they get to dip their toes in the pool before they get dumped in with the more serious competitive element of USPSA.
Yeah, I think as USPSA shooters, we owe it to all of the new and upcoming people who are ultimately going to be the ones that we want to stick around, to every once in a while take time out of trying to get onto the super squad at our local and saying, okay, I mean, John Batista speaks about this all the time, where he says, okay, here's 5 new people. Okay, new person A, you're going to go with good person A. New person B, you're going to go with good person B. And you actually say, this is your mentor. They're going to walk you through this program, and they're going to help you out for your first match. You assign a person a buddy that's going to help make their first couple matches a positive experience. They'll be able to ask questions to them, and that is going to help the culture grow. I mean, USPSA, the culture in USPSA can be so great, and it is generally, but it can be better.
I mean, what I've seen here is we have guys that have been in the sport for, you know, a decent amount of time, and they've gotten to the point where they acknowledge, hey, this is my ceiling, right? I still shoot, I still want to be competitive, but I know I'm not trying to continually push the envelope to be a competitive M or to be a GM or anything like that. But they still understand the sport very well. Informally, that's what we try to do in our shooters meetings, where we go, okay, who's new? All right, you know, you're going with this guy. But again, it's dependent on the club that you go to, right? It's not really something that is formally in place.
Yeah, and I think that USPSA as an organization would do well to essentially take if they could go through and find a way, like basically what I would say is get with your area directors and tell the area directors to get with their section coordinators, and the section coordinators get together with their match directors, and they say, all the section coordinators gets the match directors and says, okay, I want you to give us a list of like the top 10 things you guys are doing to bring in, retain, work with, and otherwise create successful matches. They're going to take all that information. They're going to send that to the area directors. The area directors will go and send it up to headquarters. And if USPSA were to take all this information of, it's really good, it's actual in the field information of what is working on the local level, because it's kind of a shocker, but locally there's not a dang thing wrong with USPSA on the local level. It's at the national level that everybody all blows up and everything seems to be a problem. But if we can take all the best practices from our match directors and actually put that into a book format or some kind of an online pamphlet and just say, hey, here's what's working really well. And we hand that out to every single match director, every brand new match director, every new club. Here's our best practices. We can take and we can start slowly changing the culture for the better. And I think that's going to benefit everybody long term.
Well, in a way, you're almost basically talking about teaching match directors how to recruit, right? So I suppose, I should become part of the Mormon Church so I can learn all your excellent recruiting strategies.
Well, our recruiting strategies, number one, involve being a friend first. And that's the single greatest thing that you can do.
Number two is having a lot of kids.
We punch above our weight class, and
that's what you like to do.
but that's a really good take on it. Is essentially when you think about match directors, most of the time people think, oh, it's about stage design, it's about dealing with practice courts, it's about getting volunteers. But there is sort of a sales, marketing, recruitment aspect to match directors that is very. It's not quantitative. It's not very set in stone. You kind of have to learn it as you go along, and then by the time you figure everything out, you just want to go back and.
As the match director, I would intentionally seek out the new shooters and do the new shooter meeting and try to be their buddy and check in with them throughout the match, simply so that they felt welcome and would want to kind of come back. Because like each one of those could potentially be a volunteer. If they shoot 3 or 4, and it's like, hey, buddy, you want to show up an hour early and help me build this match? Like you can try and do some things. It'll be cool. And
that's actually a really good point you make. And I'm not saying this to bring light on me, and it's not my intention. But when I teach my new shooters class, that's actually one of the things that I really try and do is I try and implement this. I tell them very early on, I'm like, this is a volunteer sport. We're all working together. And if you guys can help out. So like I say, okay, when we finish, we're all going to go down here. We're going to reset these stages. If you guys can help me build the stage while we're all getting ready, that's going to be really helpful. You establish the idea that everybody works early on. And then what's funny is Slips is very kind to my little indoor match for the new shooters. Because if you come and you shoot that indoor match as a new shooter, you then get the Slips match for free, which is usually, I always set it so that it's going to be the Thursday right after, or the Saturday right after. And inevitably what happens is I'll get if I have 10 people show up to the new shooter match, usually about 5 of them will show up to the actual Slipsa match. And whether right or wrong, I end up squatting with them because there's a familiar face. There's somebody that like, oh, this is Robert. He runs the new shooter match at the Armory, and let's go squad with him because he's going to help us get through our first match safely.
I mean, there really is something to be said for dipping back into where we all started from. You can easily get caught up in the competitive element of USPSA, constantly trying to get better, and then you sort of get burned out. And certainly on my end, it was always nice just to step back every once in a while and say, oh, hey, this is what I remember what it was like when I started, and it was a bunch of new guys, and all you wanted to do was just make sure, okay, don't point the gun at Robert.
Mm-hmm. Robert's rule is the best rule.
Don't point the gun at Robert. Put holes in all the paper we're supposed to. Don't worry about all these people going really fast. And the joy that they get and the sort of the newness, it helps. It does help remind you, hey, this is why we started in this to begin with.
We've just solved how to attract new members to USPSA. We cuddle up with the Mormon Church, give them a bunch of flyers, and look, we'll buy you a bunch of books of Mormon you can pass out if there's this flyer inside of it as well. So then it just becomes easy for us. We just have to buy, thousands of copies of the Book of Mormon that they can pass out on the missions.
We'll give them to you for free.
Oh, it's not just USPSA. I mean, the Mormons.
We'll get you guys some more of them white short sleeve button down shirts so you can ride your bikes with. It'll be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Not just USPSA. It's IPSC marketing now too. Have you heard of the Book of Mormon at IPSC?
I'm sure I can find some scripture verse that'll say that USPSA is the way to go.
When Jesus said walk the path, what he meant was shoot USPSA.
shoot from within the boundaries.
Yes, shoot from inside the fault lines.
Follow the founder's intent.
That's right. But IDPA is still not perfect. And despite the fact that the new rule book coming out is major steps in the right direction, and the way that they went about implementing it is 5 years after the last rule book revision, and they took all of the criticism that even includes up to a year ago. They saw the blowback from banning a club for letting shooters shoot for a not for competition division from appendix with lights on their guns.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what's in this rule book that's coming out? They realized that they kicked over the anthill and this was the future. And despite the people being at the top of the organization being fervently against appendix carry, it's going to be legal as of tomorrow. 6/1, the new rule book goes into force, and appendix carry is legal. Lights on guns and SSP is legal. They did a lot. SSP capacity goes up to 15. I think they increased the capacity in CCP as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
12 rounds now.
Yeah, range lawyer culture is still prevalent and soul sucking. At this IDPA match, I had 3 people arbitrate calls that they received in the match. One of them,
no kidding.
Wow.
Well, the one guy was the kind of the instigator ringleader guy who was the chief range lawyer, to the point where I was being overtly hostile to him, saying, look, man, you're wasting all of our time by arguing this. Nobody cares how well you know the rule book, least of all me. Let's just shoot the match. You're talking about a 3-second penalty. It's a 13-stage match. It's not worth arguing about. It's not worth $100.
Is arbitration the same at IDPA where you have to put down a deposit?
Yep. And if you lose, it's gone.
So
it just doesn't have nearly as good of an arbitration process as USPSA. USPSA is pretty
also
legit.
fair. But at the same time, this guy wanted to argue about everything. One of the guys was arguing he got a flagrant penalty because they had a monkey target there's no way to time it for the first 3 swings before it goes crazy. There was no way to time it so you could get those presentations. So you were basically stuck eating the crazy ones. So he came up with this really wise plan where he was going to run back by the port. You had to shoot through a window at the monkey target. So he just stopped, winged 2 shots at the monkey target, not even trying to hit it, just to say he engaged it so he could pass it. He shot the rest of the stage. Then he ran way out to the side of the berm and shot at the monkey target after it hit kind of slowed down. He didn't know how long it took him to start, stop, fire shots, and then run that extra distance, because the amount of time it took to do all that rigmarole was longer than just standing in the port and waiting for the target to present in a way you could shoot it. And so he threw $100 at it, citing in the rules why it should be. And it was dumb. And the rules are still not at a place where it's as clear cut as it can be, where like in USPSA, if people argue fervently over the rules, there usually is enough gray area to justify it. There's so much gray area in IDPA that it's still an issue, despite all of the ground they've covered with fault lines, with being more prescriptive, and with saying, like, being more definitive on what, you know, the things are supposed to mean. Non-shooting actions can't be punished, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
They've still got a long way to go, because I mean, I would be honest, I was a jerk to these people, because it's just like, guys, you are wasting time. We're all out here to have fun and compete, and you are wasting time. Like, you're not going to win your class. I saw how you shot that stage. It's just not going to happen for you. But you want to waste all our time arguing with the safety officer about it.
I have found, and this is anecdotal, it's very anecdotal, but I have found in IDPA, the lesser of a quality shooter you are, the lower in skill level, it seems the more likely you are to try and range lawyer your way to victory. Whereas USPSA doesn't seem to have that level for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why. But I've worked enough IDPA majors to have seen exactly what you're talking about, and you're just like, bro, you're going to lose that $100, and I'm going to laugh under my breath when you lose it, because I told you so.
It's the rules need to be tighter.
Well, that's the funny thing though about IDPA is, I mean, IDPA has a smaller rule book. Somebody said this, and I wish I remembered, because I really need to give credit to the person, but they said IDPA has a smaller rule book, but between the load and make ready and the unload and show clear, there are more rules than USPSA that govern what the shooter can and cannot do. I mean, by the time in USPSA, make ready and unload show clear, the shooter is generally free to do just about anything. I mean, like safety stuff, but
Yeah.
you're pretty free to do what you want. But IDPA as a game or sport, however you want to define it, IDPA is kind of built on this idea of you will do what we say. And so because of that, it's created a rule set that punishes you for not doing what we say. And until they kind of open that up to essentially do whatever you want, they're always going to have those problems. And you're always going to have these range lawyers who show up and they're like, well, I should have been able to do this, that, and the other. And you're like, no, I'm sorry, but throw your money down and we're going to go out and get a pizza after we're done on your $100.
I mean, how does that process work? So again, for those people that are listening, USPSA, if you want to arbitrate something, you have your range officers, chief range officers. There's a range master who's supposed to be ultimate arbiter of the rules. And if you want to go beyond that, there's basically a committee of 3 people that looks at it from a strictly rule-based perspective. My understanding from IDPA is it goes from the safety officer. I don't think
their equivalent of a range master is the match director. They do not have a range master. So the guy who draws all the stages effectively is the guy who arbitrates the match for the most part. I don't remember the rules for arbitration. I don't care enough to read the rule book anymore. I read the new one, but I didn't memorize it. But,
no, I mean you're generally right. You're generally right. They don't.
And they call HQ. I do know that they call HQ when there are these big rules things. They have to call HQ and present it to the folks at HQ on rules interpretations, which is, if it were a religion, it'd be like talking to the prophet, which is funny.
I think you have to. I think you talk to your area coordinator.
Right.
Well, the area coordinator in IDPA was at the match and was the match director.
Oh,
so
okay. So they probably kick it up the horn.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I don't know. He knew what he did. He was kind of in a guilty footing and tried to be extra cordial after he realized there were 2 stages of just shut up and shoot. And speaking of the hook that I delivered, that I promised earlier in the show, I shall now pull back the curtain as to why carry optics is not a 15-round division in the new rule book for IDPA. Female and junior shooters. A lot of female and junior shooters shoot single stack guns in ESP and carry optics because the guns are narrower. They can use grips that they can get at all the controls and it fit their hand better, because most double stack guns are a lot wider. So going to a big gun in SSP and CDP and CCP, they just kept 2 divisions, an irons and a dot division, where people with smaller hands could shoot single stack guns and still, not have an edge. Because if you think about it, going to 15 on a match where they're always 16 or 18 round stages, everybody's still doing reloads. The 15 round division is probably going to have more tack loads and less round dumping. So the ability to reload with retention is going to be rewarded a lot more in the movement pieces of the stages, because, with 10 rounds in the gun, you can generally find a safe spot to dump 2 or 3 rounds super quick and do a running reload, which is what everybody does. But with 15 rounds in the gun, you're not round dumping 7 shots to get the long piece of movement to favor a reload.
So, well, didn't they change the IDPA rules so you didn't have to do a slide lock reload? So
they changed in the new rule book. You don't, if you drop a magazine with no ammo in it, then there's no penalty. You can keep a round in the chamber. So effectively, if you're smart, you can speed load. But it's not quite there.
IDPA is kind of weird because they came up with this idea on the tack load, which was proven wrong. Yeeman spoke about this, where it was proven wrong over the 20 years of GWAT. So you're just not going to do it, and you're going to dump the thing out. But I just can't see them changing that, because that's such a part of IDPA,
of who they are.
Yeah,
it would be like taking the eye out of. By God, they're going to do it.
Oh yeah, and God bless them for it. And it's a fun little part of IDPA, and we all like to make fun of it because it's sort of dumb, and we proved it's dumb. But I kind of don't want them to change at this point, because It's what makes them
It's
them.
part of their identity. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another piece of it that I had heard, and I don't know how true this is. So if you're watching along and you know this to be true, chime in. But I had heard that back in the day, front sight would teach the reload with retention for people shooting 1911s, because if you stepped on a 1911 magazine, you'd have to retune it because most of the mags were trash back in like the 70s.
Wow.
Logically, that kind of makes sense that Wilson Combat, a 1911 builder who does this, probably went to front sight a bunch of times, and that was how you reloaded at front sight. So that's how he's reloading his 1911 pistols. I don't know that to be true, but it makes sense if all that stuff is true. I do know that Frontsight did push the reload with retention back in the day. I don't think they do now, but I don't go to Frontsight. So
do you get a membership to their hotel if you go there still? Or is that somebody else?
No, you get lots of gold and platinum memberships that you can sell.
Is it just a pyramid scheme? Is that all it is?
No comment.
Oh, okay. But also along the lines of continuous improvement, IDPA's media presence is arguably worse than USPSA's media presence, which is to say non-existent.
That's a low bar to
It is a super low bar to bang your head into, but that's exactly what they've done. And it behooves both USPSA and IDPA to get their media game together, because we are an ecosystem. Like if USPSA brings in shooters, maybe they're going to get curious and shoot IDPA, and the reverse is also true. They've got to get their media game together. We've got to get our media game together, and we need to do more shooter outreach kind of stuff using the platforms that are available.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, the interesting question to that is, we are basically a sport that runs around with guns shooting at humanoid targets. I mean, you've experienced that developing your YouTube channel, Dave, where you're having to navigate constantly changing standards on what is and is not acceptable.
We can solve this by going to IPSC targets. I'm just throwing it out there.
You could, but I mean,
I'm a big fan of IPSC targets.
You could have, like you talked about with CO and ESP staying at 10 rounds for, the younger people that participate in the sport. I mean, you have a kid running around shooting a gun. I mean, certainly with the news that happened this week, that's a really sensitive subject. And even though they're clearly not shooting at humanoid-sized targets, they could be shooting at steel. Somebody's going to see that and react.
And I think in the new rule book, I can't remember if you're in chat, correct me if you know off the top of your head, but I think they got away with the stupid scenario stages. And it was abundantly clear at the Walker's Texas Ranger State IDPA Championship that none of the SOs wanted to read those stupid stage descriptions, because they're all contrived. Some of them can come across as borderline racist, and some of them come across like anything to do with kids in school at this point just feels like the third rail. So on 13 stages,
we had a lot of fun building the scenarios, and if you do them right, I mean, half the fun of some of the IDPA stages are the goofball scenarios, but you have to go all in. You have to make sure that your targets and your props and everything like that support it. Utah State, we did that one year, and people still talk about the bear.
Yeah, there were two stages at this match, now that I think about it. They read the description. The first one was you're in your backyard gardening and looking over your hedge wall and get attacked by like an army of badgers or something like that. So all the targets had the 3 zone cut off, and just underneath the 0 zone they cut it off. So the targets were much smaller, and it was 1 shot per, and you were standing on a bouncy bridge shooting down across some barrels at these low targets. So it was a fun stage. And then the other stage was the one I told you about with the slider. Is you're in your stand deer hunting. So you started with a stock from a rifle. You had to be holding it in both hands, pointing at this. They had an archery deer target. You had to point the rifle at the deer, and then you get attacked by a family of bears. So they read the scenario on both of those, and it was okay. But every other one was like cartels, gangs. Stuff like that, and it's just like, bro, you can't do that anymore. Yeah. This is a sport now, and the only way you should do a scenario is if you've got something goofy and it's non-humanoid, in which case
I mean, John Mercurio actually did something very similar to that at the Western IDPA regionals, where it was actually historically related. They had a train station, and it was actually a blindfold start. So you blindfold, and then you had to basically rescue some, artifact from the railroad museum. And when you can work those stories in, it makes it more entertaining.
I will say, I mean, IDPA, one thing IDPA does substantially better is they know how to build props that actually last like the entire match. I'm not saying that USPSA is bad at that, but Area 1 and that whole roller coaster thing that should have been thrown out, but they were so desperate that they didn't. I mean, that was kind of bad. But IDPA's props are, when they build them, they're pretty darn legit.
For sure, for sure. Well, gents, we're almost there. We've almost made it. The other thing that they can fix on IDPA is the classification system still promotes sandbagging in a major, major way. This is.
I don't think you're ever going to get. I don't think you can ever get past that. I really don't.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
Warm-up stage at major matches level 3 and above is the 5x5 classifier. Stop this. Only way to be a real master is through match bumps.
So, are you saying that the warm-up stage, you actually could get bumped at that warm-up stage?
I haven't decided whether or not I want.
If you do that, then it has to be that
match.
many. If there has to be enough points on that stage to make it like this actually is going to count, and it's going to count hard.
Yeah. It's going to be submitted like a classifier. It's the 5x5 classifier.
Yeah.
It's going to get submitted to nationals independent of the match. And as far as the match is concerned, I mean, each string of fire in the 5x5 classifier is between 3 and 5 seconds, depending on which one you have.
Yeah,
so as a stage, it's a
20,
longer
that's 20
time.
seconds. I mean, if
and
you
there
shoot
are
a Masters,
25 shots. There are 25 shots on the table to potentially go wrong. So, I mean, if you want to win your match, you're going to have to shoot a good classifier. And if they just did it at all the level 3 and nationals to make people shoot good classifiers rather than duffing it, because I heard 3 people at the match talk about duffing headshots on the classifier so that they can get their match bump to master. That is, I mean, the 5x5 isn't particularly challenging. I mean, most people who've been shooting taking it seriously for a year should be able to shoot master scores on it. But at the same time, they don't. Like, there's a huge contingency of marksmen and sharpshooters and things like that, where they don't need to be there.
Well, yeah, I mean, at any of these like level 2 and above IDPA matches, whoever wins marksman was like very much a sharpshooter and probably an expert. And we always made the joke that whoever was second place marksman, that was the true marksman winner.
But even usually that's just a sandbagger who's not quite as good at it. Like, that's
that's probably true. That's probably actually a lot of truth to that. But USPSA has the same problem.
I mean, technically, I sandbagged this match because, like, I came by it honestly, but I duffed the one classifier that I shot 2 years ago, and I shoot one major match a year. It's this match, and last year there was a greater sandbagger than me in the division, and there wasn't enough people to get me kicked out of, master. Like, I think I beat like one shy of the thing to get the match bump. And then, like, I only shot indoor matches, and I don't care enough about it to go find a classifier match.
Right.
So I ended up winning expert carry optics yesterday. And the guy who was behind me had no business being an expert either. I mean, he should have been a master as well. He had every bit of the skill to get there. I mean, he beat like 5 other masters in carry optics too. I mean, he was a sandbagger straight up. He just wanted that match bump.
To be fair, there's when that 5x5 came out, it was, in my opinion, the 5x5 is a deceptively easy classifier to master.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's not a lot to it. I still think I have very high regards for the original IDPA classifier, because I always felt basically stage 3 was really started separating the men from the boys.
Oh yeah.
And I understand why they got away from it. It was 90 rounds. It took a lot of time out of the day.
Oh yeah.
And nobody wanted to do it.
It took 3 hours to classify.
Yeah. But it was such a good it was a good metric for who you were as a shooter at any given point in your shooting career.
Oh, for sure. The first 2 strings of fire and the old IDPA classifier were cake. There's really easy to shoot master times on. But it was the 3rd string that defined who you were as a shooter. Because if you couldn't shoot at 20 yards, you weren't making master. Like,
what's the 3rd string?
The 3rd string was like shooting from low, or was it low cover? It was shooting either side of a port at 20 yards.
You had a Bianchi barricade.
Okay.
and you shot from one side, shot from the other side, and then stage or string two.
There were 3 strings in the.
Yeah, string two, you shot from around the Bianchi, and then you ran up
To some barrels at
some
like
low
15
barrels, and you shot around
from
them.
low cover.
And I can't remember. I think the third string was you started at the barrels and you shot from around. You shot from around them or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Wasn't there like a kneeling and a prone section?
When you shoot from
Not
low
prone,
cover,
but yeah.
but kneeling.
When you shoot from
Kneeling.
low cover,
Mhm.
you have to take a knee and you have to shoot from the side of the barrel.
Right.
So, but it was a challenge. Oh, look, we got a bunch of comments. Let's see what they're saying in the comments here.
Who's that sexy guy in the middle?
Ooh, that must be what they're saying.
Yeah, that's totally what they're saying.
How can I join the Mormon Church and spread the word of IPSC and USPSA?
So we got.
Ask John Batista. Apparently, all you have to do is bet against a guy who shoots PCC.
So we got a question. I'm a big dummy. Any chance for simple explanation of sandbagging? So it's an old racing term where people would put sandbags in their car or airplane so that it slowed the car down, where they could run wide open, and then after qualifying, they take the sandbags out and the car would run full speed. It's intentionally kind of sabotaging yourself to allow you to be in a lower classification where you can be more competitive. And then in the major matches, you go harder and show your true skill. But really what it means is the people who don't, I won't say all, but most cannot shoot a master score, and they don't want to come to grips with it. So they have this little out that they're just going to get match bumps, and that's the one true way to make masters, through match bumps. And I say, if you get a match bump, the only way you're really a master is if you shoot that 5x5 classifier and shoot a master score. Get a match bump and shoot the classifier. If you can't do both, then you aren't one.
But USPSA has the same problem. I mean, the classification system in USPSA is kind of garbage to begin with, and I think I still believe that we should have a sunset period on all classifiers. After 10 years, the classifier can no longer be shot for score. It is done, and we have to keep coming up with brand new ones because some of these things are so horribly shot out, it's not even worth it. But
yeah,
I have now traveled and shot enough major matches that I've just stopped caring about the local classifiers. I'm like, whoever I am at a major match when I'm going up against like real talent like you or something like that, that's who I actually am. And because then I know where I am across like real good people. And okay, well, at that level, I'm a B-class shooter. It doesn't matter what that letter says behind it. It's who I am at a real match.
For sure. And where you land at an area match or nationals with the best shooters in the country is really kind of where you are, because they're curve busters. They're better than grandmasters. They are the elite. So you're lucky if you can shoot your classification at nationals. You are lucky.
Yeah, and I am really happy to have gotten to a point where I'm just like, I'm totally comfortable with that mentality of this is who I am when it really, really matters. Because for a long time, it's like, oh, I'll do anything to get that letter. I got to get that letter. That letter's everything. I have to be an expert. I have to be a master, whatever. And eventually you're like, no, I got to shoot really well against the best people. That's really what matters.
So we had the same question from another same person asking, how does USPSA classify people percentage based? So USPSA has a number of standard stages. I think there's like 40 or 50 of them, where there's a known hit factor that is the high hit factor, so that everything you shoot is a percentage of that. And then they bracket the percentages based around kind of a known formula where you fall determines where you classify. When you're initially getting classified, once you have 4 on the books, the top 4 get averaged, and then that's your initial classification. You keep shooting classifiers, and because they usually put them in every match, you'll end up getting they'll average the best 6 of your last 8. They throw out anything that's below 5% the floor of your current classification. So if you're a B-class shooter and you shoot, what is B-class floor? 60%?
55 to 75.
Okay. So if you shoot below a 50, they're going to throw that out. And
or 65 to 75.
Yeah. Something like it's bigger than A class, which is 10. I think it's 60 to 75. That's what it is. So if you shoot below 55, they're going to throw that out, and it's not going to count towards your average. Now, the problem with USPSA classifiers is it promotes hero or zero mentality, because when you get into A, M, and G, you have to shoot hair on fire faster than you are comfortable because you can't make the time in order to shoot the score that you need. So it comes down to consistency of when you're shooting that fast, how often do you hook up? And I mean, the good guys can do it more often than not, but even still, they'll tell you that they aren't aiming; they're observing their sights lift and return on the targets.
Which is why a major match is really the only way to tell. Honestly, I just believe that, and I used to not, but I just thoroughly believe it today.
I wouldn't disagree with that mindset.
Is Yeeman gonna talk? I'm trying to get drunk from this drinking game. Come on,
So
Yeeman.
the drinking game for this podcast, ladies and gentlemen, was every time Yeeman talked, you had to drink. So
there's a lot of sober people. Would you guys like to join the Mormon Church with this level of sober?
Wait, last time what was the phrase last time?
So
no.
What was it? It was I can't remember. I said it like 15 times just because that person's well, guess what, brother? You're getting drunk.
I would be talking Sebastian, but I'm too busy roll sizing your brass that you dropped off yesterday, and it's a lot of brass.
Everybody has an excuse.
Well, fair enough. Well, gentlemen, are there any other topics you want to throw out before we close up?
I'm such an easy person. I'll talk about anything you want.
Well,
how about you? Anything good?
Let's see. I mean, we could always do an impromptu paracast, but that might go into an area that Dave will have to filter out some things here when we start talking about typical paracast topics.
Steve and his nefarious activities.
Yes.
This is the humble cast. Oh wait, no, the arrogant cast.
Yeah, yes, right. That's the humble marksman's jerk. This is the only true channel for competitive shooting.
I just want you to remember. I mean, you don't have that many listeners. You know.
No.
Other people's Instagram has more than you.
Clearly.
You're just some nobody.
It's true. It's very true. But in other news, the main channel did cross 83,000 today, so that was a small milestone.
Nice.
So
I had a video hook up and get pushed by the algorithm. Jake Martins, I'm happy to tell you what you need to be doing for social media in order to find more eyeballs. So get in touch.
That's the thing. I mean,
he'll get our head on that. I mean, they're only in the middle of a board meeting right now.
Yeah. Well, I you know what? I will talk about this just because I have you guys, and this is good fodder for conversation. Do you listen to the new Jake Martins podcast with Behind the Lens with Brian Connolly of Hunters HD?
No, I was actually about to start listening to it, and I went on my drive home, and I missed it.
Jake, he pulls back the curtain on what he's doing, and some of the stuff that he's doing is legit. He's doing a good job at. But then in the middle of it, he talks about what he thinks the social media needs to be, and he misses the mark by miles. And like he's doubling down on the Jim Scout and Shooting USA content.
No, they need to stop doing that. I can tell you from my perspective as a match director for a new shooter match, nobody watches those stupid things. They really don't. It's the craziest thing. But people they'll go to the website and they'll find out who the match directors and stuff are. That's a great service. But I always ask them, like, have you seen any of this stuff? Nobody watches them, which is crazy because you think they would, but they don't. They're stupid and they're heavily rule centric and they're not really all that fun. And
who's delivering it? Who's delivering the message? Are they entertaining and fun to watch? Is there any sort of levity? Why on God's green earth would you spend your time competing with all of the information on the internet to watch what Jake Martins and Troy McManus have to say?
Well, that's the problem. And I mean this with no disrespect, like at all. I mean, I have my issues, but at the same time, this is like the principal telling you how to, like, navigate school. It's like, well, this is what you can do. And if you break the 180, we're going to kick your ass out and you're never coming back to this sport. And I'm like, you guys suck all the fun out of this, of what USPSA is. And like, for my new shooter match, I'll ask all these people, how did you find out about it? Well, somebody told me. I went to the website. Have you seen any of the videos? No. Like, well, there's videos on USPSA's website. There is. And that's the thing. Nobody cares about them.
Where do you even find the videos?
Here's the fun part. So this is the formula. I'm giving it away for free. Jake, take your marketing budget. You've got $100,000 to spend a year. Stop giving it to Shooting USA. Find content creators or people who just edit video and pay a small stipend to produce content for you that you post on your website. But more importantly, they mirror on their own social media outlets or channels. So if you come to a larger channel like mine and say, hey, you've got a very large platform, for $500, would you do me a video on one of these 3 topics? We think it'd be good. There could be a negotiation on what the thing is. They could approve kind of the scripting and production thing. Then it's on me to go film it, shoot it, edit it. Whether or not they generate their own kind of opening and closing branding stuff so all the videos look similar, that's kind of on them. You can go on Fiverr, and for about $100, you could get those 2 things made. So all the videos look and feel sort of the same. Or I could give you a rough cut and you could finish edit it so that all of the infographics and stuff are like you want them to be. So all the videos have a consistent feel. So if you came to me and said, like, for $500, would you do this? Like, that's not really worth my time because I have a day job. And it takes a lot of time to put a video together, but I would do it because the cross promotion is attractive to me, where USPSA would be putting my content that mentions my YouTube channel on it, and they're covering all of my production costs to get the video filmed, edited, and put together, my range fees, my gas, tolls, all that kind of stuff. I would be covered. But there are smaller content creators who just want the promotion. You could go to a smaller content creator who has a much smaller platform and be like, hey, buddy, $200. You make me a video. These are the topics.
There's a video that who's it? Tactical Hive put out.
Tactical Hive did it.
It had John Batista in it. It is the single greatest how to not break the 180 video ever. They used really good overheads with what do you call it? Like drone footage showing like, color coded. This is safe. This is unsafe. It was very easy for people to understand. This wasn't USPSA. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and I'm guessing, I don't want to, throw anybody under the bus, but the second that you get Troy McManus involved, Troy's going to look at the world from the standpoint of the rules, and he's going to basically rules everything out to the nth degree. And that's important. It is important. You want to be safe, but at the same time, you have to provide content in a format that people want to actually engage with it. And they're just not doing that. The Shooting
USA
stuff,
they don't make anything fun.
No, it looks like it was something that was created as a sideshow to a 1990s. Yeah, exactly. It is exactly what it is. You're just like, okay, did you guys just go on a macaroni and cheese budget here or something? And it's like,
he probably paid handsomely for that. Like Miles with Tactical Hive, I'm sure would charge a very reasonable fee to make USPSA content.
So high quality. It's best.
Part of his content strategy already. Every Sunday he posts a competitive shooting video.
Yeah, I actually
he's already
that
doing
180
it.
video. I stuck it into my new shooter orientation. The letter that goes out. Thanks for signing up. Blah blah blah. Go watch this video.
Right.
It explains things so succinctly, and it is easy to consume, and that's all they have to do. But I think you get the kind of the old hats in USPSA that, I mean, kind of Troy, that he rightly has to look at it from a rules perspective. And so he says, well, we can't have all this fun and game and whiz bang stuff. It has to be straight and to the letter of the law. And I get that, but it's not how people consume media.
And same thing, he talks about gun reviews. He's like, well, there's not a gun we review in Frontside Magazine that's not from a sponsor who sponsors matches. If somebody wants us to review their gun, it's like, well, what matches are you sponsoring? Which is the absolute worst way to look at it, because your customer is the member. It's not the organization. So if the members want to know about a gun and you have an interesting way of presenting the gun, like, I don't know, a USPSA match, then it's kind of on you to put that together, and you can make it really be interesting and introduce somebody who was familiar with the gun but not familiar with USPSA to USPSA. It's cross promotion.
It is, yeah. And but I mean, that's always the hard thing about anything especially with USPSA. I mean, I see this all the time in my work, where if anybody from headquarters, if they say anything on social media, you're immediately going to have 2 camps. You're going to have one camp that's like, you guys are the devil and you need to be burned at the cross. And you're going to have the other side that's going to be like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever. And social media, it's like the worst. It's almost the worst way to try and judge the real opinion of what people actually really think on anything. And so, I mean, I always kind of feel bad for headquarters and stuff like that, because if they go and say, "Hey, here's what we're thinking," then they just get blasted in the comments. You guys are dirty bastards. Why would you ever think this? But then if they don't say anything, they're like, "You guys are dirty bastards. Why didn't you tell us anything?" And so they can never win. And so you're always just trying to make this like, okay, let's do the best we can with what we got. But at a certain point, you have to. I mean, I have to give Jake a lot of credit, because he's working really hard
Oh, he is.
to do the best job he can, and he deserves a lot of credit. He deserves a lot more credit than he gets.
He absolutely does.
But
and
there's
I think the social media thing's just out of his wheelhouse. And I don't think he understands it deeply, because he made the comment that people only watch the first 20 seconds. Okay, that's called a retention curve.
Yeah.
The 30% of your audience is typically going to fall off in the first 30 seconds on a video. I make videos on YouTube. I've looked at a lot of these. That's always going to happen for somebody who misclicks. There's a million different reasons why somebody navigates away. The first 30 seconds of your video needs to set a hook and catch their attention. It's part of good content creation, but I mean, he doesn't have a content strategy either.
I have no idea that even exists, and I suspect even Jake probably doesn't either. And there's a lot of things that you learn by doing this a lot. But if you're the kind of person who unfortunately is trying to like keep all these plates in the air, that makes it hard for you to do one thing well.
Well, bear with me, gents. Those of you who are watching on the stream, if you can stick around for a second, I am filling dead air as I navigate to one of these retention curves.
Yes, because we talk about dead air all the time. You never want to have dead air. The worst thing you can do in any podcast.
Why would you ever do that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're making people wait for longer than about a second to a second and a half, you're killing people, and it's just death. And so you have to come up with these clever things called filler words. Things like, that's a great idea. Boy, I never thought about that. Here's some things that I'd like to think about. I really like the cut of your jib. Stuff like that will really engage people.
Robert, that is an excellent example of filler words. But here we go. Let's see. Share screen. All right. Don't show these again. Okay. Share screen. All right. Okay. It's not going to let me because I have to set my system preferences. But to give you an idea of what it looks like, I will describe it for you. This particular retention curve is for a short that I have on YouTube that the algorithm has grabbed. It has reached 277,000 eyeballs in 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, it's far and away the most prolific video. And the average percentage viewed on this video is 70.1%, but it's only 58 seconds long. And it's basically just open guns that were at double tap championship, where I just took glamour shots. I edited it to a musical track that I picked out that seemed like a cool thing to like. Basically, every time there's a beat, it either like cuts in and gets closer on the gun or cuts out. And every time the beat drops, it does like a splash where there's ripples on the screen, and it closes with me shooting a stage with an open gun.
Yeah. And fundamentally, there's two ways that you learn how to do this. You either put out a lot of content and you pay attention to your analytics, or you go learn from somebody who is actually doing it.
Right.
And in the case of USPSA, maybe you take and you create a third option, which is you go to somebody like Tactical Hive, the Humble Marksman, who does this stuff all the time.
Superset CA.
Yeah, all these really great content creators. And you say, hey guys, we want to drive content to you. We want you to drive content to us. Let's see if we can come up with a great idea that makes us both happy.
You could do contests. Like they could open up a drill of the month thing and interact with the user base. People going shooting matches. You could get on Instagram and post your run for whatever it is the USPSA is set up as like the drill of the month. Like there's other, podcasts that try and do that kind of stuff, but they don't have a stick big enough to actually move the needle on that kind of stuff.
Right.
But if USPSA were to do that and they were to retain Max Michelle, Lena Michalek, a host of well-known people who are posting it on their social and extending the challenge as well. So like they open up the challenge, and with it are like 4 videos from people everybody knows posting their best runs. And it needs to be some of the absolute death stalkers like JJ. And it's got to be just some people who are well-known to have prolific kind of media presence online. Cause like Bill from Go Fast Don't Suck is a very good shooter, but he's not like JJ, getting him to do that kind of stuff. And like, let's talk about the presidential thing. Bill interviewed all the candidates, and USPSA is like, golly, how do we get this information out to the user base? It's like, oh, what if we paid Bill a small stipend to interview all of the USPSA presidential candidates, and we just mirror it on our website?
Yeah, and shocker of all shockers, I bet you a lot of these content creators, they would do it do it almost for
nothing.
free,
Yeah,
just because it would
almost
drive
nothing.
good traffic. I mean, you're like, hey, do you want 30,000? I mean, I know it's not 30,000, but do you want 5,000 views that are just immediately going to come to you? And odds are, of those 5,000, probably 75% are going to subscribe. Yes, I would like that very much. Thank you very much.
And on a cost per click basis. So, I mean, like, we all know what our numbers are. Like, it doesn't matter what the topic is, but if I drop a video on a completely uninteresting topic, like, I don't know, one of my match videos, it gets about 5,000 views in a week. Like, that is a poor performing video for me, but that is like the floor of what one of my videos will do with, my subscriber base and things like that. You can do the math on the ROI. How much is each one of those eyeballs worth to you? And to me, it wouldn't take a lot of money because I'm making USPSA style content anyway. But if you could cover my production costs, I would probably mirror my content on your platform, then I would probably do it. Like, let's go. You can set the topic. We can make it happen. And I know for a fact, because I know a lot of other content creators, they would do the very same thing. And creating an ecosystem, actually using social media to be social rather than just posting terrible memes, would be fun.
And you're running for president. And I think this is something that you could certainly look at as president is how do we talk to the board who is not being mean, like as an older generation who maybe they're not really necessarily up on the social media in social media and this kind of environment. How do we get the engagement from the people who are making the decisions to step outside of the world of what they know? Because that's always going to be the hardest part of anything is let's take a chance. Let's put an idea out there, and maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea, but by gosh, let's talk to the members and let's present them with some ideas and see if we can actually make this thing better for everybody.
I mean, the content creation kind of subcontracted out is actually a really good idea. We've sort of talked about, Jake kind of being Jake being in a boat with one oar trying to do a whole bunch of different things. He talks about being director of marketing and events. Well, the events is kind of nationals, so there's a certain amount of portion that gets covered by that. What we talk about with managing the content creation, even if I were to subcontract out to Dave or a couple of the other smaller content creators out there, there's still that time of, okay, well, who's going to manage that? I mean, I don't necessarily perceive that the marketing that's being done by Jake is something that has to necessarily be a board decision. It could be something that is, okay, hey, this is the intent I want. You go figure out how you're going to go do this. And then the board gets briefed after the fact of this is what they're doing.
Well, think about the ROI you could make for the sponsors of the sport. Like, let's say you get Honest Outlaw, who has darn near 1 million subscribers, to agree to do a USPSA video. And I'm just using one of the most common sponsors of the USPSA match, 6 Hour. Let's say 6 Hour really wants him to do a USPSA video. So it's like, okay, we'll pay you to make this video, and SIG will give you this gun to shoot it in the video. And he can talk about it in the video. Like, okay, you got to talk about the gun for at least 30 seconds, hopefully saying nice things. And I mean, obviously it requires the product to be squared away. So automatically they're creating ROI for sponsors who sponsor the game. He's got a massive audience. I mean, I correspond with him on Instagram. He was asking me just yesterday about open guns. He wants to get an open gun. So I was talking to him about open guns just yesterday. So, I mean, he would probably do it. And
did you tell him the way to go about it was to get a Fantastic Bull Armory open gun?
I said there's only one choice, and it is the Ultimate Racer. But no, I mean, to that actually is a really good gun for what he wants. He wants a lighter open gun. It's like, well, your options are polymer gripped or steel, because everyone stopped doing aluminum because apparently it breaks the aluminum grips. Well, the only person making plastic gripped open guns right now is Bull Armory, so that's kind of the one that you get to choose from, unless you go to a small boutique builder.
Yeah, you could totally leverage that. I mean, you're talking about the smaller content creators. You give them some sort of flexibility on the content they do. They put it in their own format.
Well, I mean, so let's talk about it. There needs to be a content strategy.
Right.
Like, there needs to be an overall theme, like something that makes sense. So, like, what are the topics going to be? you're going to be able to do maybe 50 to 60% of what it should be. And you need to leave the rest of it to respond to what's going on. Because if somebody drops a new gun, like say it's a day that ends in Y and 6 hour releases a new gun, all of a sudden you need to make content on that gun because it's topical. It's ready for search engine optimization. People are looking for content on that gun. Hey, Sig, send a gun to so-and-so. Here's his FFL. He's going to do a piece that's going to be good for both of us. All of a sudden, you know, there's a piece of content out there that Sig has the gun in the hands of whoever, and he's making content that shows USPSA.
I mean,
Actually,
well, if you think about it, I mean, so how much of with your day job, how much of this takes up, how much time does this take up for you just running your YouTube channel?
Running my YouTube channel during the week, I put about an hour and a half to 2 hours into it every day. I wake up really early and, you know, before I take a shower and go to work, I will, you know, work on the channel, do channel stuff. And then sometimes after the kids go to bed, I'll do stuff like this.
So that's just, I mean, that's just for one channel. You know, the everything that we talk about, you know, you're effectively looking at somebody who, I mean, let's just say best case scenario, you're talking part-time, like 20, 30 hours a week.
For one video a week pace, yes.
Yeah, 20, 30 hours for somebody at USPSA to basically dedicate that time to.
Well, hold on. That's not including filming. So days where I have to film, it's generally that same hour and a half of doing the computer work, and then probably a 3 to 4 hour block. So call it 2 to 2.5 hours a day on average, including time to get to the range and film.
And if we're looking at USPSA coordinating with different content creators, you know, creating the overall content vision, so on and so forth, you know, that's pretty close to a hefty part-time, if not a full-time job by itself.
Well, you also have to get somebody who knows how to make interesting media to actually come up with the content strategy. Like Jake Martin's on the Behind the Lens thing talks about the media he wants to make, and every Friday they're going to release a video, and it's all on topics that nobody's going to watch. He's going to waste time and resources making this video because he thinks it's a resource, like it's a video for the USPSA website with a question somebody emailed me once. It's like, that's not why you make content. You make content that's engaging and fun, like come up with a wild question and then answer it on video.
There's actually
you're looking at it. I'm sorry. You're talking about it from, you know, content being informational as opposed to engaging with like a little.
You can do both. I mean, I think I do an okay job at making content informational and fun to an extent. I mean, I would be bigger if I was better at making it more fun, because the demolition ranches of the world do significantly better than like the super technical stuff like hell, like I do. But
there's actually a comment in the there's a comment in the thing that actually speaks to what you're talking about, though. He says, Jay says, you can also promote USPSA to non-gun tubers that may have an interest. And the reaction I get from people when I say I'm a competitive shooter versus I like guns is vastly different. Now, if you were able to kind of like piggybacking on the 6 hour thing, if USPSA went to 6 hours and say, if you can go and give us this kind of content, 6 hour can go and actually market that on their own. They can do that, and you suddenly have this cross promotion where you have 6 hour, which is a brand that people know and trust, showing Max Michel, who's arguably one of the greatest shooters of all time, shooting these guns in a competitive environment, and you see the USPSA splash logo right there. And all of these people who they may be just curious, like they just like, hey, this looks really interesting. Is there a new shooter match or something like that? Well, you now have this video promotion that people actually is engaging. And the problem I see with what Jake Martin's and USPSA headquarters is putting out, it's marketed towards people who already shoot the game. It's not marketed to people trying to get into the game. I may be wrong in that, but I kind of, that's what I see.
So, I mean, content that is interesting to people already in the game is usually also going to, or hold on, let me rephrase that. Content specifically aimed at a general audience that is well done will generally be as interesting to people who are already in the game as well.
Yes. No, I agree with you there. I totally agree with you.
But the reverse is not true. Mm-hmm. Like, we can have a very in-depth conversation on figuring out the value of shooting a disappearing target in USPSA, and within the sound of my voice, that's basically the only people in this entire world who care about it. And conversely, you could be like, okay, there's a lot more esports guys than there are USPSA guys, right? A lot more.
Mhm.
So if you get Lena Michalek, cute little Lena Michalek, to throw down the gauntlet against whoever the number one CSGO player is, or Battlefield, or whatever the current FPS game is, you get them to agree to do a piece of content. This would cost a lot of money to do. This would be a very expensive piece of content to get one of these people and pay him and stuff like that. But
yeah, the ROI might not be there.
yeah, no. Troy and Jake have no business being in this video. But at the same time, like if you were able to arrange like a small mini match where Lena and this like dude who is just the number one Counter-Strike player in the world, whatever it is, go and shoot PCC against each other, and like she intentionally is kind of girling it up and really kind of hitting a non sequitur, like you're hitting esports vein, you're hitting like that's the kind of content that people in USPSA would love, because they want to see Lena Mitchell like beat the crap out of this cocky esports guy. And conversely, people who think shooting guns in video games is cool, probably not all the time know about guns in real life. So they might think it's really cool to actually see like a MCX or an MP5 or whatever gun they end up, having them shoot in the video.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
I mean,
there's a lot of cool stuff you could do.
You know, it'd be really interesting to talk about this. I mean, that's how Jessica Hook, Dave.
Oh yeah,
yeah. That's how she started. She actually started here at
Richmond. She was in video games. Yeah,
she was in video games, and she came here to shoot her first match at Richmond, and there was that link there. So it would be interesting to kind of get her take on that.
But there's a lot of crossover, cross promotion type stuff, like where if it's done, like basically the rule of thumb is an interesting piece of content is done at the extremes. Like if you think about, okay, if I ask you whose optic reviews do you watch on the internet, there is only one answer, and it is
Humble Marksman.
Well, after those are done, it's Sage Dynamics, and the reason is because it's extreme. It's because he shoots 2,000 rounds and drops the damn thing on concrete 5 times.
Right,
and that's a very extreme way to test an optic. So that's what people go and see. When Mac was doing the gauntlet tests on all his guns, guess which gun reviews got the most traffic? Mac's did. It doesn't really matter what the thing is. You have like the Mr. Beast concept still holds true. Like you have to go big if you want to make an interesting video. So you don't put one Lamborghini in a video, you put 5. The same holds true with guns. Like, okay, get Atlas and Infinity and all the race gun makers to put their guns in the same video, and all of a sudden that becomes really, really interesting. And if you can find another spin on like some kind of, like we already did the video game thing, but find some other crossover thing, like Ferraris. Like let's say these are called the Ferraris of the gun world, and this is an actual Ferrari. Let's see if this, you could come up with something like that and make it interesting. But
it's essentially pushing the envelope of what we're currently looking at for content creation.
You're always going to have trouble from the old timers who are like, well, is this being done in a safe manner, and we can't be associating ourselves with this kind of extreme content. And it's like,
well, wouldn't you be able to?
Robert's rule kind of needs to apply in some of these cases.
Yeah, but wouldn't you be able to separate yourself if it's not necessarily specific USPSA generated?
So
content,
okay,
right?
here's how you handle that. Here's how you mitigate the risk. Now, do not try this at home. We're at the range with a trained USPSA range officer. We are using USPSA rules of safety. You can say what the safety rules are and then get back to the content. Like it's like, oh my gosh, it's educational and entertaining.
I like that.
I
dig it. That's
good.
It
makes
that's
sense.
really good.
It's very similar to what
you sneak in carrots. Like that's the most effective marketing. Is like it's not an actual like piece of marketing. It's a piece of content that tells you all the stuff you need to know about whatever the thing is. And I mean, that's why video reviews have become so popular, and gun makers have started sending guns out to channels like mine, is because if they have a really good product and somebody who is a unbiased third party says nice things about the gun, that's going to do more to sell guns than putting ads in Recoil magazine.
Which is sort of funny that we are still pushing out this front sight magazine.
Yeah.
It's like, why? I mean, I hate to say this. I mean, and maybe I'm wrong. I just don't think that I am. But like magazines are kind of dead.
Oh, they are. They're 100% dead.
I mean, the only time you ever look at a magazine is maybe if you're in the airport and you forgot your iPhone. I mean, I don't know why we're still pushing this. I get it. There's a money aspect to it, which is fine, but that's not where people are consuming content. And so do we need to be pushing this magazine in the way we do.
Well, I mean, what's the actual engagement in the social media universe for people that are in USPSA? I mean, just look at the social media stuff that we've talked about over the last week. You have a certain portion that is very vocal about things that are being discussed in USPSA, and even for the people that I talk to, they're not actually they don't actually recognize like, oh yeah, this happened or this happened on social media. Like I don't think the engagement is as much as we think.
No, I mean, social media by and large is a tempest in a teapot in terms of everything that happens. Whatever happens on social media, wait 15 minutes and it's over, and we'll find something else to be completely enraged about. But at the same time, if we're trying to get content out to members in the way that members are going to actually consume it, when was the last time we looked at how people are actually engaging our content? Is it through YouTube videos? I mean, I know certainly for me, like that's where I get most of my content, is watching like YouTube videos. That's anecdotal, but I think a lot of people
The reach
are
of each platform is different depending on what you're trying to do. Like
Okay.
Instagram and Facebook are for interacting with brands that you are already familiar with. You will never, ever, ever find new eyeballs on that unless you pay them money, because that's their model, is you pay them to boost your posts.
Okay.
I mean, you
So
have the
it's
Paracast page,
all
and if you make a post, you see on the business page, it's like boost this post and see roughly the same number of followers that you have will see this piece of content.
Yeah.
And it's just like they hold your content ransom. But that's what Jake is basing his media strategy on, because they have the biggest footprint in their Facebook profile, which is cool. But that's basically preaching to the choir.
Right.
So
it's talking to people who are already engaged with you, and it's not really getting out to anywhere else, because Facebook has no incentive to boost your content beyond it, because it doesn't comply with their ideology.
Are the worst platform for guns.
Yeah.
Far and away. They will ban you on that in a heartbeat for posting content about guns. I mean, people have generally stopped using it for gun stuff because they're so quick to ban.
Yeah.
But like Instagram is more like, so like the stuff you put on Facebook is probably better situated to be infographics, media, small, very short clips, maybe not even shooting guns.
Yeah, I remember talking to a guy who
bad.
said that videos, they're just not viewed on Instagram. It's still majority of people that are looking at just pictures. They're just swiping right past everything.
Same thing. It's the exact same thing on Instagram. It's very difficult to make a short form piece of content, and I can point you at two creators who do a really good job of making content that works on Instagram, and you could make this be on TikTok as well, potentially. Firepower United, Calvin, who's here in the DFW, does an amazing job on Instagram. His Instagram is one of the most entertaining, and I will always look at whatever his things are. And another person here in the DFW who just does like amazing visual storytelling, like art type pieces. Tino Shooting or Shoots, I can't remember.
Tino Shooting.
Yeah, THYNGO Shooting.
Oh, yeah.
She produces media for the Dallas Cowboys sometimes on kind of like a volunteer basis. So like she's really good at editing to music and really stunning videography. Like what she creates is art, and I can't do anything at all the way she does. Like she's incredibly good at it. So that's the kind of content you make for Instagram. Like the kind of stuff I make plays really well on YouTube, which is why if you want to see my content, it's on YouTube, because it doesn't do well on any of the other platforms. That's why I don't mirror my content on Instagram, because it doesn't find any eyeballs.
Yeah, I mean, whether you like it or not, YouTube still is it is still
the number 2 search engine in the world.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
and then all roads lead to Rome, or YouTube in this case.
It's the only platform, and so like the retention graph I was going to show you on YouTube Shorts. YouTube right now, like this is an unprecedented time in YouTube where small creators can get seen using YouTube Shorts, because they are desperate to compete with TikTok and Instagram for short form content. So like this piece of content that I put out, it got like 25,000 views in 2.5 weeks. And then all of a sudden it got 20,000 views in a day.
Yeah, but that's kind of the problem though, Dave, is, I mean, this is going into the weeds a little bit, but YouTube is going out of their way to allow the content until they get mad at you, and then they're going to say, well, now we're changing the rules. And so, I mean, YouTube still is the greatest source of finding new content and things like that. But like how do we get into an ecosystem that doesn't rely on YouTube and maybe this is way off into the weeds, I know, but
Sure.
it's just kind of an interesting thing.
They
And the question that I would take one step further is in USPSA, what is our age demographic? I mean, like,
Average age is 45 to 50, if I remember correctly.
okay, so like I'm 45. So right now, I'm in that generation that is saying that magazines are dying out. We don't use magazines. We don't look at magazines anymore. And if that's the case, then from my opinion, USPSA needs to be slowly moving away from the magazine type format and starting to invest in what the youngsters are actually looking at. And maybe that is the TikToks, the YouTubes, and things like that. That's probably the smartest way to go.
So I pulled up my analytics because I can see age and gender of everybody who sees my channel. Like I can't not individually, but their metadata. So my channel, despite how handsome I think I am, is viewed by 97.7% males and 2.2% female, and users specified as 0.1%, whatever that means.
Isn't that indicative of YouTube in general, though, as far as membership?
It does trend heavily male. It's true. I think it's a 70% male platform. Women use Pinterest and Instagram more.
Wait, Pinterest is still around?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, thing.
Pinterest is one of the, believe it or not, Pinterest is actually one of the most used, and in architecture, it's one of the things that we get so much content from our homeowners from. They use Pinterest like it's going out of style. It used to be House, but Pinterest is very good for giving really good content of this is the cabinet that I like. Okay, thanks. Cool. And so we all have a Pinterest account just for that reason.
So my age demographics are 11.7% of my audience is 18 to 24, 32.6 is 25 to 34, 26% is 35 to 44, and 16% is 45 to 54. 55 to 64 is 8.1, and 65 plus is only 5%, which makes sense because my humor is probably lost on them.
So the question that I have for you then is how do we get USPSA headquarters, the board of directors, all those guys? How do you get them to a point where they actually are saying, okay, maybe what we're doing right now isn't working and we need to make a change? Because typically in most businesses, the only way for change to happen is for somebody to die, retire, or be fired.
So I'm going to make a stab at what I think the targeted demographic of USPSA needs to be. And this is based off anecdotal, but it also kind of makes sense. So people are having children later, right? So they get into their late 20s, they've got a bunch of disposable income. So people who are roughly 25 to 32 needs to be a target demographic because they have the money to play USPSA, probably males. The other demographic is once the kids are grown to the point that they are self-sufficient and driving, and you get your Saturdays and Sundays back, you get your weekends back, and you have more disposable income. Roughly 45 to 55 is probably where that band is. People who have the time and the means to come out and shoot a match. Right. So those two age brackets, and those are honestly, I would say, where most of the shooters at my club matches fall, is either one of those buckets.
I would agree with that. The people that are coming out to my new shooter match, you pretty much hit the nail on the head of the age group.
It's rare to see somebody who's right at 21 years old. They're usually 25 or older. And then usually it's like, yeah, my kid's got a soccer game, but they're on Friday nights now because he plays for his high school and not on Saturdays now. So we're not doing the club thing anymore. So yeah, it's rare to find people who have, or, in the process of raising kids who still shoot the sport and have the time and means to do so.
So then, Yi-Min, I mean, from the perspective of like a presidential candidate where you would only have one vote, how do you convince a board to that, your idea is that we need to make this change? Because it is arguably a pretty big change to make for any organization to be like, okay, we're just going to go and just get rid of this entire magazine. I mean, I think USPSA would have an easier time getting rid of L10 than they would that Front Sight magazine.
Well, part of it is looking at, if we could look at the cost and say, okay, well, how much are we actually spending on a magazine? We have Jake basically dealing with the marketing stuff on a full-time basis. I'm not entirely sure that the board really has complete say on, okay, Jake, we actually want you to do this content. We want you to do this content. I mean, as a full-time employee, I think it is, my understanding is that it is more of a vision and say, hey, Jake, actually go figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the discussion we're having with the numbers, that actually is data that, I don't, who knows what's being discussed in a board meeting where they're actually sitting in here and going, hey, if we take a look at your typical YouTube engagement for, the different gun channels, this is the average age range. This is the people that we want to look at.
Here's a wild thought. Maybe they should find some of the biggest YouTube channels and pay them for their demographic data, or just ask them. Like, if they just asked me, I just gave it away for free. I bet you could get that information, and you could probably come up with a good avatar profile for who your customer is, so you could do stuff that suited that customer.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that's the same with like what I was talking about with like, match director best practices. Go talk to the people who are actually on the ground putting the stuff out.
But hey, look at that, Jason. It's the same concept we talked about with the constructor championship.
Yeah, I wanted to bring this up for the audio listeners, but Jason says USPSA as a league, like football, baseball, NASCAR, teams for points, televised web platform, craft beer sponsorship, ammo manufacturers, Chevy trucks, the money's all there. So I that goes to Robert's earlier point where it's tough to put content featuring guns and alcohol. It's the same thing, like Formula One can't even advertise alcohol now. They're all advertising their non-alcohol product, but the logo is still the same. So it's like the Heineken 0.0, like, oh, that's what I want to go buy is the Heineken 0.0 when I watch Formula One. But
hey, nothing says guns like, a Coors Light off the back porch.
Hell yeah, brother.
No, that would be Yangling. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay.
But he
for me that would be A&W root beer, but
this is a concept.
Soda vanilla ice cream.
This is a concept that we have discussed before, I think with both of you, of the process of crowning a national champion based around the season of USPSA, be it the average of their best performance at 2 area matches and the nationals match, and the nationals match is weighted, to be the same as the 2 area matches. Something like that, where it's a points-based series and there is kind of a culmination to a season.
How cool would that be if you actually had that point series and there was this kind of this I don't know the words, but it's like inter rivalry where you have these guys that are basically just trying to get the most points, and they're really close. Okay, well, I got to show up at Area 7. Well, Dave's going to be there, so I got to be there too. And throughout the whole season, I mean, people are just talking about it, and you have somebody that's dedicated. Like Dave puts out a podcast like every, once or twice a month. Here's where everything's stacking up. Here's the next match that's coming up. I mean, you start to generate a lot of traffic and just buzz and people talking inside of USPSA, which naturally starts to spill out into other areas. And it may not necessarily grow the sport like, as big as Major League Baseball, but at the same time, just all of people talking it, because everybody in sports, everybody looks for, I mean, like baseball is the number 1 sport ever created, but everybody looks forward to the World Series. But in the World Series, they also have
only Americans play.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, everybody is looking forward to the playoffs. And even when you're not even in the playoffs, it's like, where are the Yankees right now? Where are they as far as their standing? How are they shaping up against the Red Sox? Stuff like that. People talk about that stuff. We don't really have that in USPSA. There's never anything in what we do that gets people excited in April and kind of just helps to build that excitement level and that talk in our game to the end of the season, the culmination championship of whatever it is. And in that regard, I think we could do that. It would be something fun to do, and I sure think it would be helpful for the organization as a whole.
Well, but honestly, the organization doesn't even have to do it. If, like, I keep using SIG because they're one of the title sponsors at all the big matches.
Mm-hmm.
So if Sig Sauer decided they wanted to put together a championship series and use it as a platform to create content for their platforms about where it stands, I mean, USPSA would probably need to do something if there was like a constructors series, like we talk about, but
right.
And the thought being there that, like, at area matches, manufacturers could name champions who would be playing for points. in those matches, and based on their finish, they bring back points to whatever constructors there are, which is an interesting dynamic because it makes if Nils is winning all the matches and he's not shooting a SIG, hey Nils, why don't you come shoot a SIG? So like it creates a class of professional shooter in a level that we don't have presently. But also the other side of it is like, well, what if we made a better gun that everybody just wanted to use in competition?
Yeah.
Like it would put creative pressure on it. It's just like, well, nobody shoots Shadow 2s anymore because they're too dust cover heavy, and the fad right now is a balanced gun.
Right.
CZ realizes they're losing in the constructors thing, and they are a brand based around practical shooting. Seems like they might, get with the program and drop a new model that all of a sudden swings the momentum back toward them, so that they can get the crown for the constructor champion for production for the year, whatever it is.
Well, yeah, and it's cool because it would also serve as a way to basically show who's still relevant in the game. I mean, where you have like people like, okay, I've been shooting this game since forever. Well, okay, when was the last time you shot a national championship? Well, never. I mean, it's been like 5 years. Okay, well, you're not really relevant. So let's go talk to all these other guys. Hey, JJ, do you want to come shoot this SIG? Hey, Nils, do you want to shoot this SIG? Let's have you guys all get involved in this thing. And it just turns into this big giant like race to the end.
Well, I mean, I was going to say the performance culture of USPSA needs money to produce events. We need to be paying people to set up the event because nobody wants to do it.
Right.
So we should figure out a way to get ROI to $400 to actually get events produced so that we can make the content around. Then, all of a sudden, manufacturers are getting eyeballs because a lot of content's being made around the stuff that they're doing. And I mean, if you want to get named as a champion for whatever brand, it's like, well, guess who has to post some content with the guns? You have to post your match video, and you have to post like one other piece of content per month, whatever it is, and in exchange you get whether it's dollars or support or guns or whatever it is. I mean, I'm sure they figure out a way to incentivize
and it's a good thing because I mean USPSA, I mean, in terms of what do we actually bring to the game, it fundamentally we don't move the needle in terms of like overall firearms sales. No. But if you want to talk about innovation and technological improvement, we are the number one product out there. Nobody does it better than USPSA. We proof technology better than anybody because we will tell you very quickly what breaks. And in my case, I break a lot of things, but
all the things.
Robert,
which gun should I shoot? None of them. They all break.
They all break. But that's the beauty of that is you can go to these manufacturers and be like, we're going to give you an entire season of people proving the effectiveness of your firearm. And it causes them to be like, okay, well, if we're going to be devoting an entire season, we better not have a gun that fires when you drop it from 3 feet. It forces the innovation a lot quicker and faster. And it's to everybody's long-term benefit because it means that SIG puts out a high-quality product. USPSA gets more eyeballs, which ultimately help us get more people who want to show up. There's a lot of value in that.
We cut you off. You had one more thing to say. Why don't you bring us home, brother?
Oh, we lost track of that. Robert does such a great job of filling in the dead air that he just sucked it right out of my lungs.
Right on.
That's a lot of years of podcasting.
Fair enough. So, Robert, if people want to hear more,
that was the phrase. Fair enough.
Fair enough. That was it. That's what it was. So, Robert, if people wanted to hear more of your melodious voice, where can they do that?
Well, I would tell you to hop on your favorite iTunes or whatever podcast format that you like and look up the Paracast podcast.
The Ghost one, right? You're on the Ghost one? You guys talk about Ghost?
We are totally the Ghost. If you go to the Ghost one, you'll be listening for a long time and you won't hear me. But look us up there. We're also on Telegram. If you look at the Paracast on Telegram, we're there. And we always post your questions. It's a fun little show.
No, if you want the full impact of Robert, you have to watch the YouTube channel.
This is
for
true.
Sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you can see all the crap I have in my background. But such as it is.
And Yi-Min, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
They can still find me on Instagram. Literally my name that you guys see here on the channel, You can also find me on Facebook, same thing. And every once in a while, if you actually want to look at some campaign stuff, you can go to www.keepuspsafun.com.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time. We went a little long, but I really enjoyed the 11th inning that we just finished up there. All right, guys, into the broadcast.